Okay, so let's add and subtract some fractions. Okay, so on this page you might want to hit pause and just kind of read through it, but the gist of this page is that in order to add and or subtract with fractions, you have to have a common denominator. So it has to be the same. If you do not have a common denominator, we're going to talk about that here in just a second, but it becomes a little bit more complicated. Alright, so on this problem right here, notice that our denominators are the same. They are 3. You do not ever add your denominators. So our denominator will be 3. Now with the numerators, we don't have like terms. They don't both have x's, so you cannot add those together. But what you can do is you can write them down just like that. And you're done. There's nothing else you can do to this. Alright, for this problem, notice how you do have a common denominator again. So our common denominator is 24. And in the numerator, we want negative 23 minus 13. So whenever you do that math, because those are like terms, you can add those together. You would get negative 36 over 24. And then you ask yourself, is that simplified? And it's not. So they both, looks like they have a, I'm going to divide top and bottom by, let's just say 4 for now. Oh, look, that can be reduced too. So negative 3/2 is your answer here. Now, what if you gave me an answer of negative 1 and 1/2? Because those are actually the same number. I would take either one. So just make sure that you do your math right. Okay, again, first thing you should look at is you want to make sure that you have a common denominator, and in this case we do. So our common denominator is x. And then in the numerator you've got negative 10 minus 4, and we can go ahead and do that math because those numerators they have like terms. So you would get negative 14 over x. And that's as good as that one gets. Okay, on this problem, again, don't underestimate your calculator. Use it, practice with it, but you also need to know what you're doing. So on this problem right here, I would just look and ask myself, do I have a common denominator? And I do. I have common denominators throughout. So I would add these 2 at a time. So 3/8 plus negative 5/8 is negative 2/8 minus 1/8. And so now I'm going to add or subtract those. Negative 2 minus 1 is negative 3. Negative 3/8 is our final answer. Alright, so this page is just letting you know that the least common denominator of two fractions is the least common multiple of their denominators. So the number that both denominators, the smallest number that both denominators can go into evenly. Alright, so for this problem we do not have common denominators. So the first thing that I do is I look at my biggest denominator. My biggest denominator is 18. And I start listing multiples of 18. And I ask myself each time, will 12 go into that? So the first multiple of 18 is simply 18. Will 12 go into 18 evenly? No, it will not. So now I'm going to do the next multiple of 18, which is 36. And ask yourself, will 12 go into 36 evenly? And yes, it will. So therefore, 36 is our LCM, or lowest common denominator, as well. So we want 36 on both denominators. Alright, so now you have to ask yourself, what did you have to multiply this 12 by to get it to be 36? Well, you have to multiply it by 3. So therefore you have to multiply the numerator also by 3 because we're creating equivalent fractions. So the numerator on the left becomes 21. Now, what did you have to multiply 18 by to get it to be 36? 2. And so I want to multiply the top by 2 as well. so you get 10. So now you want to add your numerators together. 21 plus 10 is 31 over 36. And that's your final answer. This is just a reminder page, so you might want to hit pause and just take a look at it. Okay, on this problem, we have 15 and 24. And I want the common denominator, the lowest common denominator for 15 and 24. Again, I usually grab my bigger number. So I start writing multiples of 24. So 24, 15 won't go into that evenly. And by the way, I know that it's going to have to end in a 5 or a 0 in order for 15 to be able to go into it evenly. So I'm just going to keep on trucking until I find a number that 15 will go into. 48 is the next multiple of 24, and I know 15 won't go in that. 72, 96, and 120. 120. So 15 does go into 120 evenly. So there's our lowest common denominator. So I want a denominator of 120. Oops, I don't want a plus there, I want a minus. On both fractions. So to get 15 to turn into 120, I had to multiply by 8. So I've got to multiply the top by 8, the numerator by 8. 8 times 7 is 56. And on 24, I had to multiply by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then 19 times 5 is 95. Okay, so now I want to subtract 56 minus 95. So off to the side here, I'm going to do 95 minus 56 and know that my answer is negative. 15 minus 6 is 9. So I get negative 39 over 120. So here's the thing about this. That is not reduced. 3 will go into both of those. So I get negative 13 over 40. And that is reduced. So there's your final answer. Again, this problem is so easy on the calculator. If I were you, I'd practice it both ways, by hand and on the calculator. Okay, so this problem, we want a common denominator of 40. Again, all I did was I counted up 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, and I found the first one that ended in either a 0 or a 5, and that's 40. So I want both of these guys to be a denominator of 40. So what did I have to multiply the one on the left by to get it to turn into 40? 8. So 8 over 8, so I get 24 over 40. The one on the right, I had to multiply by 5. So 5 times x is 5x. Now, our denominator is going to be 40. But our numerator, we don't have like terms. You cannot combine those. So you would just have 24 plus 5x in the numerator. And that's the best you can do with this problem. You can't do anything else. Okay, here's another review page for you, so you might want to hit pause if you want to read through this or take any notes. Alright, so look at these two problems. Notice how these two problems have the exact same numbers and variables in it. The only difference is one is subtraction and one is multiplication. So with the one on the left, the subtraction problem, I want to find my lowest common denominator, and my lowest common denominator is 30. So I want us to have 30 there and 30 there. So what did I have to multiply 6 by to get it to be 30? 5. 5 over 5. And so 5 times 5 is 25x. And the one on the right, I have to multiply by 3 over 3. So I get a 9 there. Now, in the numerators, they're not like terms, so you cannot combine those. You can just rewrite them over the same denominator, and that's as good as that gets. Okay, the one on the right, you don't have to have a common denominator to multiply, but you can reduce before you multiply. So I'm going to reduce the 5 and the 10 and the 3 and the 6. But don't forget, you still have an x up there in the numerator, so that's 1x times 1, which is just x. 2 times 2 is 4. And there you go. Alright, so this is how to simplify a complex fraction. Don't forget that a complex fraction is just a fraction within a fraction. Okay, so look at this. We've got a fraction in the numerator that's being squared, and then we also have some stuff in the denominator. So the first thing that I would do is off to the side, I would do this math. So 1/2 squared is 1/2 times 1/2, which is 1/4. So my numerator is 1/4. My denominator, I'm going to do that math off to the side. 4 plus 3 squared is 4 plus 9, which is 13. So this turns into 1/4 divided by 13 over 1, which is the same thing as 1/4 times 1/13, which is 1 over 52. Okay, so this problem, you've got fractions in the numerator and you also have fractions in the denominator. So again, off to the side, I would simplify the numerator. Off to the side, I'm going to simplify the denominator. So I've got 1/2 plus 2/3. My common denominator here is 6. So this one I have to multiply by 3 over 3. And this one I have to multiply by 2 over 2. So I get 3 over 6, and then I get 4 over 6. And I wind up getting 7 over 6. And I do recommend that you keep this as an improper fraction instead of a mixed number. It'll make your life a lot easier here in just a second whenever we have to combine the numerator and then denominator and do something with it. Alright, so the denominator, 3/4 minus 1/6. Common denominator here, or the lowest common denominator, is going to be 12. So multiply this one by 3 over 3, multiply this one by 2 over 2, and I get 9 over 12 minus 2 over 12, which is 7 over 12. So I wind up with 7 over 12 divided by, oh, sorry. That's not right. I wind up with 7 over 6 divided by 7 over 12. Okay, so I'm going to write this horizontally. 7 over 6 divided by 7 over 12. Keep change flip. And make sure that you reduce before you multiply so that you're dealing with much smaller numbers. And just multiply straight across. You get 2 over 1, which is 2. Alright, for this problem we're going to evaluate these expressions. So I'm going to put negative 1/3 on part A in where I see x. So I've got negative 1/3 plus 1/3, and that creates 0. On part B, I've got negative 3/4 plus 1/3. I do not have a common denominator, so I've got to create one. 12 is going to be our common denominator. So I get negative 9 over 12 there. This one, I get 4 over 12. Negative 9 plus 4 is negative 5 over 12. Alright, for this problem, the place where you're going to mess up is that minus sign and that minus sign. You're going to have two of them right next to each other, and you guys tend to drop one of them, so be careful with that. So I've got negative 5/6 minus negative 2/3. Now it's important that you go ahead and do change. Now our common denominator here is 6. So this first one, I don't have to change it at all. But the second one, I need to turn that into 4/6. So negative 5/6 plus 4/6 is negative 1/6. Alright, for this problem, the only thing that's being squared or raised to the second power is the x here. Okay, the 2 is not and the y is not. So you want 2, and in parentheses we're going to put 1/4 for x squared, and then we're going to put negative 2/3 in right here. Now, I know that a positive times a negative is going to be negative. Okay, so off to the side here though, I'm going to go ahead and do 1/4 squared is the same thing as 1/4 times 1/4, which is 1/16. So this problem actually has turned into 2 over 1. I just wrote that as a fraction just to make my life just a little bit easier, times 1/16 times negative 2/3. And now we can reduce some things. So I'm going to reduce this 2 and this 16. I'm also going to reduce this with this. That's perfectly legal. Now I'm going to multiply straight across. 1 times 1 times 1, or negative 1, is negative 1. The denominator, 1 times 4 times 3, is 12. So negative 1/12 is our final answer. Okay, last problem. So again, I'm going to substitute. I'm going to put negative 4 plus negative 2 over 8. I'm going to simplify my numerator. I get negative 6 over 8. And now I'm going to reduce that. And there's that answer. Okay, if you have any questions, let me know.